Now I cannot guarantee, but the goal is to wrap up this extra large F-4 Phantom from Skymaster aircraft in this video. Last video we got all of our details kind of started, sorted out, got our fuselage joined together, and we're just moving on with the organization of this aircraft. All right, last video we finished off with plugging most of our lines in here. We've got a few other things run. One of the things we've done is get our lighting controller mounted. Now, the Skymaster lighting controller, it says it's rated for 7.4 or 2-cell LiPo. One thing I found is it's better to run a lower voltage on these light systems. So we're using a Castle Creations BEC, and that's dropping the voltage to about 5 volts. So it's going to be a little bit better on the lights, and that's how we've got everything wired up. So we've got the landing lights plugged in here. Now the landing lights are the ones that are on the front nose, and those should be operational when the gear goes up and down. All the other lights, I don't know what each of these channels is assigned to right now, so we've just plugged them in. So they may be flashing, they may be solid, I don't know. All right, so servo-wise, we are all done, or outputs on the central box is all done. Obviously, we're going to clean all that stuff up, but we're just getting everything pre-run. Next thing I'm going to work on is our power leads going to our S-spec. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep this fairly simple. This silicone wire here, this comes from the afterburner lights at the back. So those are going to go into one of the S-specs, S-spec number 1, and then our lighting controller, so this guy here, will power S-spec number 2. So we'll just do up 2 leads. For this guy here, we're going to do our soldering inside the fuselage because we need to put the MPX connector, and this uses a backwards connector compared to the battery connector. So this would be like the female connector, essentially. So we're going to get those guys done up next. All right, guys, so we got the nose cone fit, sort of. It still has some more final adjustments to do, but the point of all that was to get our nose tray fit, and I'll show you the reason for this. So it is a fairly large piece. You can see it actually interlocks with the front nose gear former there. But the primary thing I'm looking at when I do this kind of stuff is any sort of interference. So it's kind of hard to get it in camera, but if you look right there, you can see the center rib piece right here is interfering with that nose gear blue line. So we need to sand this guy out a little bit, make kind of a U-notch in it to allow that line to clear, because that line wouldn't last very long sitting against that piece of G10. So it's held in place by a whole bunch of blind nuts with M3 bolts. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. These guys here are what the nose cone locks on. So anyways, the point of getting this installed is number 1, to see that interference points, but also come up with our plan for our stuff. So we're gonna have things like our maybe our gauge mounted right here, our air fill valve right there. We can have fuel and smoke lines coming through here, and all of our fuel and smoke fill from the front. We're going to have all of our EXT plugs maybe along the bottom here. Batteries are all going to go in this lower tray, probably plug in right here. So I kind of been working on this, coming up with a plan for this layout. All right, so while we had all the lights turned on and everything, or plugged in, I figured I would power this thing up and see how everything worked out. So everything's good. We just have a very basic LiPo battery on there, so nothing's super awesome right now. But our lighting system's all powered up. So I've got the lights set up on SC switch, so forward they are on. So right now this red guy is obviously flashing, nice and bright, even at a reduced voltage. And then the back one there is also lit up. Our gear lights are also working as well too, nice and bright. So if I do gear up switch, nothing's gonna happen to the gear because there's no air pressure, but the lights turn off, which is perfect. So that's good. And then the real cool thing, of course, is the afterburner setup. So throttle stick up. Very cool. Half stick, and off. That is awesome. All right, and the other thing I just did was I created a logical switch for the gear lights. So basically, in order for these gear lights to work, we need the gear to be in the down switch and we need our light switch to be on. So right now the light switch is on, the back lights are flashing, the gear is on, and if we do our light switch off, that turns everything off. The important thing about that is if you're on the ground doing testing and stuff and you don't want the lights to be on, you want to be able to turn the lights off, but also have those front lights turn off. So pretty straightforward. I'll just do a quick rundown if you're not familiar with this. So we go into advanced properties, logical switches. We created a logical switch called lights override or over. Control 1 is our gear switch, so that's got to be in the gear down position. Control 2 is our lighting switch, which is SC, and the condition is AND. So if that's turned off, there's an X. If it's turned on, there's a check mark. Gear up, X, gear down, check mark. So both of those conditions have to be met. And then once we've created the logical switch, we go into our model, we go into function assignment, and we go down to gear lights, and we assign logical switch to operate the gear lights. So I'll delete this out. Oops. I deleted the actual thing. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's create it again. So we need to create a function. Call it nose light. There we go. So nose light is 15. I can't remember what channel that was on. We can probably go into servo assignments. Oh, nose light is 17, that's fine. And then we need to go back to function assignments. Nose light. Okay, so here it is. So nose light. So we go to this, we go that. Logical switch, light override, okay. Lights off, lights on. So that works exactly like it's supposed to. All right, so we got the nose section here reinstalled. I've just got it sort of temporarily installed with just one bolt on the top or one fastener just to, because we may need to take it out again. Playing around with batteries here. So I've got a couple 3-cell 4,000 milliamps, and those are going to fit perfectly, 4 of them across the battery tray. And I was just playing around with plug locations, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 plugs on each side here. So there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. The batteries will go in there. We'll have 1 lead coming out the top, 1 lead coming out the bottom, because there's a cross brace here that holds the batteries in. So I think that's the good plan for the batteries. Working on other things, this section here will be blank. I was thinking about cutting this off, but the problem with cutting this off is it adds quite a bit of structural integrity to this whole nose section. So if we cut that off, there's going to be a lot more flex in this entire area. So we'll just keep it the way it is. We've got our EXT plugs here, so we'll have to open up that slot a little bit, but that gives you an idea of what we're going to do there for the access ports for the different devices. Yeah, so coming together, that looks really good. Now, one of the last things I've been thinking about over the past couple days is where to mount the pitot tube. So on the smaller F-4, the antenna pod, I think it is, mounts more on the fuselage, but there's also not a removable nose cone on the smaller one too. So on this one, that antenna pod mounts mostly on the nose cone. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing we did on the smaller F-4, and we're going to mount the pitot tube right in this section right there. So we'll drill a hole, make a pass through into the fuselage. Great spot for the pitot tube. And yes, I've been told by many people that that location will not work for a pitot tube, and I will reassure you that that location absolutely does work for a pitot tube. We've done it on the Su-30 on the gun. We've done it on F-4s. We've done weird spots on various different aircraft, and the pitot tube works great. It may not be, 100% accurate, but while you're flying, while you're landing, it works beautiful. And the other thing is it keeps it out of the way, and we don't have to do anything stupid to try and mount it in the nose and have some sort of disconnect system and stuff. So that's where we're going to mount it. All right, so a little more organizing on the front area. So we have opened this up a little bit. I need to do a little bit more Dremel work because my Dremel died, so I'm just waiting for that to charge. My little servo plug things just fit in this slot perfectly, so unless I open this up, they don't actually fit on the areas that I opened on each end to fit 5 across there. That's the goal. Fuel and smoke fill valves. So we are using this style of filler on this aircraft. This is a Festo filler. We're going to have little holders in the front here. You guys have seen this setup before on our aircraft. And we're going to have little holders there. That plugs in. But you want to have a mechanical valve with this setup as well. Now this works like an air chuck. So you've got a closer in there. Hopefully that'll show up. But right now this is closed, so if you're trying to suck air or blow air through the tube, it won't work. And as soon as you plug the end in there, then it works. But you want to make sure that you've got an on-off valve as a second step, just in case. So anyways, this is going to go to our valve. One side's going to be smoke, one side's going to be fuel. We'll label those, of course. So I'm pretty confident with our layout now as far as how everything's going to work. All of our plugs are going to be there. Our pressure gauge is going to be there. Our fill valve, our BVM purple fill valve, we're going to put right there. All right, guys, making a little more progress here. We've got our through fittings done up for our fuel and smoke tubing. We've got our valve holders, our valves installed. All of this 3D printed stuff is available on our website. These guys here are little holders for the fill ends, the drip catches. Those aren't available on our website, but if you really need them, you can shoot me a message. But those are installed as well too. So that's all installed with a drop of CA, and then we've got some epoxy holding those and eventually is going to cure. So that stuff's done. And we've also done up all of our extensions. So each of these extensions has a purpose, right? We've got receiver 1, receiver 2. This one is for our Cortex. This is for our 900, and this is for our Zykoy gear controller. So let's say you want to make a change to the Zykoy gear controller. All you're going to need to do, undo your nose cone, plug in your data terminal, make your change, unplug the data terminal, and you're done. What the point of those extensions is it eliminates having to take this cockpit out. You do your maiden flight, and the Cortex doesn't initiate properly, you don't get your double bumps that you're looking for, you turn your plane off, plug your bind plug in, turn your plane on, it goes into setup mode, you go right aileron, left aileron, forward elevator, back elevator, right rudder, left rudder, gyro off, and you're programmed again. You don't have to take the cockpit out. That's the point of those extension ports. And additionally, when the owner gets his plane, he's going to take a Y cable, plug it into the extension port into, let's say, receiver 1 as an example, plug in the extension port, bind plug on one side, bind plug on the other side, turn his, well, the plane's going to turn on at that point, he can bind his receivers. Super simple, very easy way to do things. All right, so we kind of got things worked out here on the front tray. We got everything mounted. Now I'm working on the Pitot tube, and the Pitot tube, I've drilled a hole through the, I'm assuming this is like an air intake duct type thing. And I had to pull the nose section out because we need to sand a hole into the interior side. So just gonna take my Dremel and do a little bit exploration here. Now when I drilled this out, this whole piece is hollow right there. So I'm thinking as soon as we grind that out, it'll be hollow on that side and we'll be able to get our Pitot tube mounted in that location. All right, so we got our tray back in now, finally, hopefully for the last time. Pitot tube's installed there. You can see sort of the back side there. Anyways, I used Hysol. It was actually pretty easy to get access to that. So we've run the Pitot tube line all the way back here, and we have installed our M-speed sensor right there, and it's plugged into our expander right there. So M-speed sensors all hooked up. We will confirm that that in fact works, but very, very simple, nicely simple. Now the way we install this Pitot tube is we only leave just the tip sticking out, and we use the atmospheric pressure from inside the fuselage. What that helps to do is to hide the Pitot tube where you've only got the little tip sticking out versus having, about an inch of it sticking out. So you get the atmospheric, the white line, and the red line, which is the actual center airspeed sensor. So with that, we've got our 6mm Festo lines here on our fill setups. And what I'm doing is I'm just working out our labels for the all of our expansion ports here as well. So we've got some 3D printed labels that I've done up here. I've got more. These are just some of the extras that I have. So anyways, we'll use the Zykoy one, the receiver 1 is what that means, EXT, receiver 2 EXT, we've got an R900 and a Cortex one. So we'll have those 5 installed over top of the expansion plugs. All right guys, so just getting all the switches, receivers and everything bound up to the radio here. So we've got the receiver number 1, primary receiver in the aircraft. We've got receiver number 2. So initially I'm just setting this up as a dual path. If that's what the owner wants to do, he can keep it that way. He can also switch it to a clone, but it's easiest in a situation like this where we're sending an owner an aircraft. It's easier to have it set up in dual path. So we've got receiver number 2 bound and ready to go. You can see there, pair secondary module is done. We're using one of these RCSW switches. That's already paired to the on-off switch here, so that's ready to plug in. Now I was just trying to pair the R900, and the problem is it wouldn't pair, and then I looked at it and I'm like, oh yeah, it's got the wrong frequencies, because this is a US radio, this is a receiver from Europe, so this is not compatible. So we'll get this installed, but I'm not able to bind it to my radio, so yeah, that's just something to be aware of. All right, so we got our power leads done up here, so the exact same thing is on the other side. This side here, we've got left turbine, right turbine. The other side are the receiver batteries. We've got our power leads going through the G10 or fiberglass wall here, an extra layer of shrink tube to protect the wires, exactly the same thing on the other side. Now all of our wires come down the left side of the aircraft. That's kind of the interference side of the aircraft. Any of our other leads come down the other side of the aircraft. We've been sticking them on the right side of the aircraft. So those leads all go back to their appropriate locations. So we now have the battery inputs plugged in the central box, and the turbine leads go to their appropriate data relay modules on each side. So power supply is finished. We also have the compressor tied into our left turbine. So turbine 1 power lead right here, and that just has the compressor tied right into the wire. So that is all set up as well. So last 2 things here to run is our Cortex programming lead and then our 900 receiver, and also get our 900 receiver mounted in this area. All right, so last things on the front tray here was the air fill valve and the gauge. Those are installed, everything's run. And other than the pilots, we have everything hooked up. Now, I did end up just plugging in the 900 receiver. Reason is that's not going to do anything because my radio won't recognize the signal. So it is plugged into the central box. It is plugged into our EXT port extension going to the front of the aircraft. So when the owner gets this, then he can bind the 900 to his radio. So that stuff is all installed. Next thing we have to do is we have to go through and shoe goop all of our connections and clips. So I haven't done any of the clips yet, so we've got a whole bunch of wire keepers everywhere. I like to make sure that everything works first, so we haven't really confirmed that everything works, but we have turned the plane on without the wings on, and that's all good. So I'm gonna go through and do some shoe gooping, and then we are close to test running these engines, I think, is going to be the next step. So everything's been gooped in this section of the aircraft. We still have some stuff to do on the underside, but we need to get our wing prepared to go on. Now, there isn't a ton of clearance between these engines and hot sections of the aircraft, and the underside of the wing, or the top side of the wing. There's a couple inches there, so we want to make sure we heat protect this area. Probably fine, but basically I'm just going to put heat shield from the front of the turbines to the back here on the actual wing section. So we've joined the wing section together. We've got about 10 inches of space, and then our side to side. We're going to put a couple layers of BVM ceramic heat shield paint in this area right there. All right, so we've got 3 coats of BVM heat shield on the wing now. We're just letting that dry a little bit, and then we'll pull our tape off. Got our batteries installed, our built by label as well, and batteries are nice and tight. So 4 batteries go in there. We've got all of our power leads up top. They plug in to the plugs on the side. Now it makes no difference how these 4 batteries are plugged in because they're all identical, they're all the same, and they all are going to do the same thing. So it's time to get into some of the finer programming details. Now, because we don't have our wing mounted to the aircraft, it's going to leak air, so the air is down to 0. I also unplugged the compressor from the central box because otherwise the compressor is going to keep running. Next thing I'm doing is figuring out which turbine is which. So now that we've got the telemetry and everything popping up here, we've got one turbine, which we don't know which one it is, and we've got other turbine right there. So what I've done is I've unplugged the right turbine battery, and now just our left turbine, so turbine 1 as we call it, has power. So this turbine here still has voltage, so that is left turbine 1. So we're going to rename this. So we'll go over here and we'll say, so left turbine 1, and now we'll relabel the other one to be right turbine 2. And there we go. Both turbines are now labeled. Make sure they're labeled the same. So yes, left turbine 1, right turbine 2. Perfect. So that is one of the big steps accomplished. Now we'll plug that battery back in. So now we can go into our displayed telemetry screen, and we can add a couple things to screen number 2. So we can have turbine 1 and 2 on there. So delete that. We'll add telemetry. So left turbine, we'll go with left turbine fuel. Oops. And we'll add right turbine fuel, and then we'll add left turbine temperature, and we'll add right turbine temperature. So now if we go to these screens, we can see we've got left turbine fuel, right turbine, left and right, right? So now we're going to add 2 more things there. So we'll add RPM, and then we'll add RPM for the right one. There we go. So now we've got all that stuff set up for left turbine, right turbine. Now I'm not sure if the turbine screen that we normally use works for 2 different turbines, so I'm going to play with that a little bit and see. All right, in the third screen for now, I just added our pressure for the sequencer and the pressure for the M-speed sensor, or sorry, the speed for the M-speed sensor. Now I'm going to blow into that and confirm that it works. So there we go, M-speed sensor works. Okay, so M-speed sensor works. I blew into it. We've got 146 miles per hour. And normally you'd see your compressor on in the options here, but because we had our compressor plugged into a normal servo port, that's why it's not showing up. So I'm going to change the location of that, and we'll try and get our compressor added to our system as well. All right, and additionally, we've got a couple things to change here. So we've got, because we're using dual path, we've got to go into our Device Explorer, Cortex, and we are going to turn Dual RX on. So that's done. And then we also want to go into our second Rex 3, and we want to change our output period to 11, alarm voltage at 6, I think. We'll just check the other one. So 11, alarm voltage at 7. Okay, so we'll change that. Fail-safe, we're going to disable. Alternative pin configuration, so E1 and E2 are EX bus. So we're going to change those. And now this is outputting a signal through the Cortex. There, so now that stuff's done. Second receiver's set up, and our Cortex is also set up. All right, so we've moved the compressor to one of our ports on our expander, and that is all good now. Next thing we have to do is we want to turn the aircraft on, and we want to get our turbines primed and ready to run. We can also do our programming here initially with our aircraft or our turbines. Now, the first run-up on this aircraft, we are going to do without the wing on. Now, the reason for that, obviously, is we want to have perfect access to the underside, the top side, wide open, make sure everything's good. And then tonight, we will be doing a live stream at our second channel, which is the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. And on the After Dark channel, we're also doing an engine run-up on there. So this video will come out after the After Dark is live, if that makes sense. So if you don't know what the After Dark is, it's a completely separate channel. There's some links down below. Do live streams here from the shop. If you're on during those lives, on the live stream, you can ask us questions, interact with us. It's tons of fun, and often you get to see stuff a little bit early, little tidbits here and there, like the engine run-ups on this aircraft a couple weeks early. Time to start working on some of the smaller details of the aircraft. So we are going to work on getting our cone completed next. So the cone just needs to be fit a little bit. So when you keyhole the cone on, some of these fasteners are out a little bit too far. So the cone kind of sits oblong a little bit. So you just tighten these guys down and get the cone adjusted so it's still easy to install, but nice and tight against the fuselage. And we can also start to get probably our front cockpit installed as well. All right, so we flipped the plane upside down for the first time in this configuration with all the stuff and some fuel in there. Got the radar dome, maybe is what it's called, installed on the nose cone. Got the nose cone snugged up a little bit. Actually had to do a little bit of sanding on the fiberglass piece because the nose cone was sitting off to the side a little bit. I glued this guy on with 5-minute high sol, roughened up both sides. So that stuff's good to go. We still have to paint the little inlets there that we did on the nose. Went through and gooped all of our connectors. So that's something that I like to do on everything as well. So I've put goop on our data relay modules and all of our keepers and everything in this space. So I think the next thing to do is get our wing installed. Now, the wing is assembled over there. We gotta flip it upside down, get it on the aircraft. And this is probably one of the most challenging things with this F-4 is you pretty much need 2 people to put it together, I would think, unless there's some other way to do it from the underside. But I don't know if that would really work. So I think generally you're flipping the plane upside down like this. You're taking the wing like that, installing it on the plane, and then using 2 people to flip the plane back over. So I think that's the best way to do it. Makes the most sense to me anyways. All right, so plane wing is together. Let's see how this works out. I'm gonna put the big bolts in my pocket, and I'm gonna get one of the proper size Allen keys, which is a 5mm Allen key. So those guys are in my pocket. Big bolts are for the front. Smaller bolts are for the back as far as length goes. And let's see. About installing the wing on this thing. So the way I planned it out was for the wing to kind of sit like that. I heard a little bit of grinding, but the grinding is the BVM heat shield material. So we want to go back, I think, a little bit more. Yes, just like that. So now we've got great access to our connectors. So we can get those done up. And we have done this so the wing connectors go inside the wing. That was the way we designed these things. Okay, so one side's done, other side to go. All right, so both wing connectors are hooked up. That's what it looks like. So that was fairly simple. I think this is going to go together well now. So again, we just tuck the excess inside the wing, and we'll see about how this gets bolted up together. All right, so overall that wasn't too terrible. Definitely need two people to flip the aircraft over. That's going to be one of the only key factors. So this is definitely not a plane you'd be working on by yourself at the field. All right, so I got the wing bolted down and everything's pretty straightforward. Bolts go in quite easily, no issues there. You need a big 5mm Allen key, but that is what the aircraft looks like assembled. Now, one of the key things was the position that I put it on the Lukey stand. So the rear part of the aircraft here, that's a former in the aircraft that's sitting on that rear portion of the stand. And this front portion, it's sitting on the intakes, and that part of the intake is pretty stiff. When I pushed on it, it was very strong. So we could also use a hood stand like this as well. We would just need to make sure that it's spaced out properly. So if we were to use the hood stand, we'd want to put it probably right in this area right here, and then on one of the formers in the back. But I like the Lukey stand better. Seems to work well with pretty much every airplane. So part of the struggle now with this aircraft is flipping it over. So fortunately with the F-4, it's got fairly narrow wings, so flipping it over is not going to be too bad. We're going to let the front end cure a little bit before we flip it over. And while it's upside down, we will get that guy painted and just give everything a check over. All right, so a couple things that we've checked while the plane is upside down is number one, check the incidence of the tail section compared to the wings of the fuselage. We'll do this also when the plane is upright. I don't know if I can show you this on camera, but basically if you look at those horizontal stab tips, as you come down the wing, you can kind of see that the profile stays the same. And then we also did the exact same thing on the underside, or what's currently the underside of the aircraft, and it looks really good. So before we flip this over, this is also a great time to do our gear check as well, just because we don't have to worry about the gear collapsing or anything. So we're going to fill this aircraft up with air, we're going to power things on and confirm that we're happy with how the gear works. The gear's working great, it's very aggressive, so keep that in mind. The doors are very aggressive. We've got our PSI showing up here. I know that's saying bar, but that is pressure right now. And then the compressor's also plugged in and ready to go as well. So we'll do a gear up here. The compressor might turn on, it might not, and when we do a gear down, we'll just wait for the compressor to restart. So gear up works great. Pressure's at 92 psi. Doors close. This little part here needs to be glued in the down position. So gear is good. We've got 89 psi. Brakes do not work in the up position. Gear down, landing lights turn on. All right, so gear is working okay. The next thing we'll check is our nose wheel. So we're taxiing out with the flaps in the normal flying position, and we go to line up for our takeoff and go to takeoff flaps and leg extends. Now obviously the leg extends aggressively because the plane's upside down on a stand and there's no weight on the plane, so we'll check that on the ground, but that is the intention there. All right, and obviously we did not get this aircraft completed in this video, so we're breaking the last video up into two parts. So next video, we will be wrapping everything up. That is the final video in this series, and Nez is looking forward to it as well too. Lots left to do still, engine runs to do, so stay tuned for that one where we wrap up the F-4 XL Skymaster aircraft. this thing. I'm very impressed with it. It's a beauty. So stay tuned for that, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to you channel members who are members of the channel. If you're not familiar with what channel membership is, channel members get to see our videos early. So often our videos are uploaded to YouTube 1 to 2 weeks in advance, and they get early access as channel members. So if you're interested, there's some links down below. Thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.